Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the March 22nd live learning not live learning, honors roundtable on innovation and creativity. And I'm trying something new this month with a show and tell theme based on innovative or creative technologies, products, practices, really anything that students want to, share that they've found either in their studies and different courses or their professions, or just through their own research and things that they've come across that they think are really fascinating and potentially are going to have a big impact in the coming years and decades. So I'm just going to start it off. I know before we started recording, some people had some things that they wanted to share. Did anybody want to start off? And then my thought was share a little bit, however much you want to share, and then we can just kind of talk about, discuss like our thoughts or how we think it might, relate or interact with other things or our own lives, our own specializations, majors, careers. So, yeah.
I guess I could start.
Sure. Thanks, James.
So I was talking about SOTUS earlier, and it's to me, it's one of those acts of environmental concern that I think we really need to kind of get another handle on. Basically, we have in third world countries, especially, there's not a clean water source, and there's not enough clean water to go around. So what SOTUS is basically solar disinfection of water. And I'll see a lot of people in third world countries, they will get these bottles and they'll fill it up with water and they'll sit on the sun for about 6 hours, or if it's cloudy, about 2 days, and it will disinfect all the water. And there's even further research to go and see if they can sort of incorporate that into like a bigger picture, especially with the different regions. Tropical settings, of course, might take a little bit longer because of the whole cloudy setting. But in deserts, you'll have a lot of that sunlight, and that can actually benefit having another clean water source. So I thought that was like actually really, really important to actually discuss.
Yeah, thank you, James. Water is a big issue. And I know one of the courses that I teach often, and perhaps some of you have had it already, or if you haven't, you might have it at some point in the next little bit of your educational journey, is Science 207. And one whole week of that class, we talk about water issues, water pollution, water scarcity in certain areas. And yeah, certainly access to clean water is a big issue, because obviously we know there's the oceans, but they're full of salt. So the only way to turn ocean water into usable, drinkable water is through distillation or potentially reverse osmosis, but ways to get the salt out so that we could use it for human consumption or irrigating crops. But yeah, that I had actually not really seen, or I guess it wasn't really on my radar, that there's kind of a big effort to look at the solar disinfection of water. But it makes sense because, we know that the sun is very powerful and potentially even dangerous with its irradiation, basically. That's why we get sunburn, and can also get skin cancer from exposure to the sun, but it also destroys a lot of microorganisms and things as well. One thing that I was trying to find an image of it, kind of related, not so much solar disinfection of water, but just other ways to kind of gather freshwater resources. And I've seen these, a lot of people are working on basically trying to catch water vapor. So they have these like large like sails, or potentially made out of plastic or other materials, and it can catch like basically fog or even just water vapor, like that might happen at nighttime in certain like arid regions, and then basically collect it and concentrate it, and so you can get usable fresh water just right out of the air. And I'm sure it works better in certain climates and certain weather patterns, but I have seen that is another kind of innovative approach to getting fresh water in areas that might have an issue with that. Did anybody else have any thoughts about the solar water disinfection?
I don't have anything in particular to that, but I have taken the science class that you've mentioned. And it was a great eye opener. It really was. Trying to understand how pollution impacts underground water, the drinking, and how fast it spreads. So the science class was definitely eye opener.
Yeah, glad to hear that. One thing that I thought about too when we're talking about these water issues and like water purification, and I actually be really curious how the solar disinfection would work in the case of algal blooms. I don't know if it was kind of covered in Science 207, but and it's somewhat personal to me, although I didn't grow up in so like in Ohio. I grew up near the Cleveland area, which is on Lake Erie, but it's kind of in the northeastern part of the state. And then on the very northwestern part, right by like where Ohio connects to Michigan, is Toledo. And that side of Lake Erie, one of the Great Lakes, I guess Lake Erie is one of the shallowest Great Lakes. And that side, the western side of Lake Erie, is particularly shallow. So it gets warmer than the other part of the lake. And when you have the especially runoff from agriculture or other sources, including even lawn runoff, where you're getting phosphorus, like phosphorus and nitrogen fertilizer type things getting into the lake, it causes the algae that is in the lake to just like go crazy, because the algae it's a type of a plant, so it loves the fertilizer and expands. And there's particular types of algae that produce toxins that are harmful to humans. But the problem is, so that, Toledo and Cleveland get their drinking water source from Lake Erie. They bring it in, but then they disinfect it and filter it, and it goes through an entire treatment process. Well, all those municipal treatment processes don't have a way to deal with the toxin that the algae produces. So occasionally, especially Toledo, because it's in that shallower, warmer part of Lake Erie, their entire municipal water system becomes unsafe to drink if they have a big algal bloom. But I actually am going to look up if solar disinfection, because the toxin is a chemical component. It's like, it's not a bacteria or a virus or even a parasite or something that I'm sure the solar disinfection, but solar radiation can also break down other components. So I almost wonder if solar disinfection might work and might even break down that toxin into less harmful components.
Yeah, that's actually I haven't even thought about that. So yeah, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
I wonder if those principles could be applied to hydroponics. I know that growing vegetables in water is becoming a big thing. That might, I mean, if you could disinfect and clean out the water, that's gonna inevitably be the home where your plants and when your vegetables grow. That could be a great innovation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I know I live in a big city, so in order for me to get any kind of like organic food, I have to leave, because you never know, and they'll put an organic sticker on food and they'll call it organic, but we never know. But when you live out, outside of the big cities, you're growing it, and in those smaller communities, you're probably growing food for the entire community. I think hydroponics is something that would be great, and I think it's more sustainable than what we're doing now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, it does make me think of kind of another maybe technology that can be used with hydroponics, because hydroponics you actually do want you want nutrients for the plants, like you do want some nitrogen and phosphorus and other minerals and essential things for plants. And there's a technology called anaerobic digestion, where you can actually take sewage, like sewage or sewage sludge. You can take waste from agriculture, like especially animal manure. Like that's a big problem with our large scale animal operations, is they have, like, if it's pigs or cows, they have all this manure, and sometimes they store it in these open air lagoons. It creates lots of smell issues. It can even cause health issues. That amount of like even fecal matter and methane and stuff being in the air in that area. So instead of having it in open air, you can put it in an anaerobic digester. Anaerobic just means lack of oxygen. And in those conditions, organic materials with liquid and the right microorganisms breaks down into methane gas. So methane is very similar to natural gas, and you can use that methane to generate heat. Like you can heat water, you can use it to run a generator to generate electricity. So some farms and actually here in where I'm at in Columbus, Ohio, one of our wastewater treatment plants has an anaerobic digestion component, and you can see it has these they're like these really big domes, and they're made out of like a stretchable material, so they get inflated, and then they use that natural gas probably to like run processes in the building itself, generate electricity and heat to process the waste. But when you're done digesting it, getting a lot of the methane out, you're still left with a nitrogen and phosphorus rich wastewater, like effluent from that digester. You've removed a lot of the material and a lot of the solids, but you still have a lot of like loose nitrogen and phosphorus, and you have to deal with that before you put it out in the environment. So you could put that nitrogen and phosphorus that you now have into a hydroponic system to give nutrients to the plants, as long as you did it in the right dosage, so it didn't overwhelm the system. But that's one way, and it would work great in an urban environment, because you have the wastewater, or in an area, if you have a farm, if you have the agricultural manure and stuff being processed in the anaerobic digester, you could also then have like a hydroponic greenhouse produce right next to it, and then use that anaerobic digester water to fertilize your hydroponic crops. So
I know there's a couple people here that do the aquaponics, where they use the fish and the fish waste to actually siphon back into the top of the bed and then drain through. So essentially everything waste wise that the fish leave out is exactly what the plants eat in general, and then you can actually eat the fish on top of that also. So I've seen some where they use like brim. I think what they use the most is tilapia.
Yep.
But
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. Yeah, thanks for sharing, James. Thanks for joining us too. Did anyone else want to share an innovative or creative thing that they are excited about? If not, I have one queued up that I can share. All right, this relates to, wait, I'm going to make sure I share my screen with sound. This is from The Economist, relatively recently, April 7th, 2021. And this is a interaction, and maybe some of you have seen or heard of this, but how artificial intelligence is being used in creative applications, including art. And maybe some of you have even seen like the filters where you can take a photo and it'll make it look like a painting, different types of paintings, even like an oil painting or watercolor. A lot of that has been developed using AI algorithms and basically like learning how to create that artistic effect. So I'll just share. I'm not going to share this whole thing, just kind of like the first few minutes.
These portraits might look like paintings from centuries gone by, or digital art created by human hands. But they're not. Each one has been imagined and created by an artificial intelligence. It's the brainchild of Mario Klingerman. He's leading a group of artists who are pioneering the use of AI in the world of visual arts.
As an artist, you're always in this interplay between accident and control. So at one side, you want to have control over your work, but at the same time, you also want interesting accidents to happen. Using AI allows me to find a good balance between the two.
This artwork is created using neural networks, computer programs that mimic the structure of the human brain. Mario has trained the system on thousands of portraits from the 17th to 19th centuries. The AI learns from them and creates a never-ending stream of unique portraits. In the past decade, the use of AI has expanded into numerous creative fields, and its role is continuing to grow. Marcus de Sotoy is a professor of mathematics at the University of Oxford.
I think a lot of people think that all that AI could possibly do is to produce more of the same, to produce pastiche. And I think that's really missing an opportunity, because this AI is really beginning to push the boundaries, change things, disrupt things. And so I think we're really seeing something very special happening at this moment.
Before they take over the world, many experts say they will take over your job.
Technological disruption is often assumed to lead to job losses. But such anxieties are frequently overblown.
We'll stop it there. What does everybody think about that? Has anybody seen? I think there's even a website. It's either a website or an app where you can go and you can enter like words or phrases, or you can even just describe something, and the AI will create art based on your description. And sometimes it like looks really, they usually look pretty trippy. But I think you can even say like, do a dog, or, dog in Baroque style, or you can like, it can even like interpret like different styles and stylistic periods, or you could say like impressionist, like impressionist castle, or, and it'll, you'll get something interesting. I'll have to find the link to that, but go ahead, James. I saw you on mute.
Yeah, so I know that there are some websites out there, because I actually I'm a part-time game streamer. So part of that is trying to find like a good logo or something like that. And recently I tried to do like a cartoon version myself. And there's websites out there that will actually cartoonize your entire photo and make it like a cartoon, which I thought was kind of interesting. Is it worth it? No, but I can see it growing, and I can see it, blooming, and eventually, there's going to be times when like different paint styles and different paint eras are going to be available to, mimic that whole conception. So yeah, I mean, I have seen it actually grow right in front of my eyes.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool that you do, you're a part-time game streamer too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can tell you that much.
Does anybody else have any thoughts about either AI and specifically maybe its applications to creativity or art?
Not specifically regarding arts. I work in the wireless industry right now. I have been for 18 years now. And to see the transition, where we came from and where we are right now, and especially the implementation of 5G, the speeds, the data, having so much automated and so much dependent on the power of data, it's truly remarkable. So not so much in regards to arts, but the AIs. I mean, we have an application at work where I can literally scan something, and it will tell me what it's supposed to look like and where it's supposed to go and how it positioned for merchandising and brand standards. So it's fascinating, and I think, to be honest, as much as we've done, we're probably just scratching the surface, because the more data, the more we have. I mean, right now I have my entire house automated, my garage, cameras, TVs, light bulbs, you name it. I mean, right now they'll sell you a light bulb with the Wi-Fi enabled in it for no more than $5 to $10 each. So it's very accessible, very dependent on data. And the faster we get, I'm sure there's going to come a time where we're going to have 6G, and that's to me, that's fascinating. From a doorbell that allows you to communicate with someone to more sophisticated items. So the art is definitely an interesting concept of it, but I believe, just my own personal opinion, that we're just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, those are great observations. Yeah, I think I think artificial intelligence is definitely going to impact almost every aspect of our lives, especially in terms of industry, the economy, and also, you know, hopefully making our lives easier in many ways, but it's also definitely going to be a disruptive force. I did a honors event last year that was just totally about kind of an introduction to AI, and it's one of the areas that I kind of follow as a intense interest area, seeing where it's going and what the cutting edge things that are happening. But there are artificial intelligence programs that can basically, you can give them any sort of video game and just put in some parameters of like, here are like positive outcomes or here are negative outcomes, and then let the game or let the AI just run with it, and it'll make a lot of mistakes, but it eventually will figure out how to play the game at a superhuman level, like, you know, more so than any person could do it. And that's, you know, it's kind of like these neural nets, these things that mimic human neural pathways and like learning. And the pathways that lead to successful outcomes are the ones that are retained, and the ones that lead to unsuccessful are replaced with you know, other you know, because some of it's randomized or some of it is you know, trial and error, and then like when the things work, they keep those and they keep improving on things. So it's very interesting. Hi, Chris. Chris is one of our faculty, our honors faculty. Thanks for joining us. Did anybody else want to share anything? If not, I have another one I could bring up. Actually, you know what, and I bet you, James, that you've maybe heard of this. Okay. Share screen. Share with sound. Hopefully I'm not spoiling it too much. See if anybody.
Hi, I'm Thomas Anderson. Like many of you, I work with computers. I like the freedom I feel outside the limitations of the real world. But computers are also mirrors, reflecting back who and what we are and the choices we make, the worlds we build. They also confront us with questions about why we want to choose this over that, why we want to make X instead of Y. Where do ideas of who we are and what we want even come from?
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
For instance, I'm not even sure why I'm here. I remember waking up and thinking that I'm supposed to come here, that it was important for me to ask people, how do we know what is real? Hi, I'm Keanu Reeves. Over 20 years ago, I first played the character Thomas Anderson in the Matrix trilogy. Those films pioneered digital cinema with shots like bullet time. Back then, we talked a lot about where the digital age might take cinema and narrative. In an industry where actors have tried to remain perpetually young, we wondered about digital faces that could become immortal.
Hi, I'm Carrie Ann Moss, and I played Trinity in the Matrix films. 20 years ago, we asked ourselves how long it would be before faces and bodies could be changed as easily as we change clothes.
We wondered, what would identity mean in a completely digital world?
And what would reality mean when a world we can build feels as real as our own? theoretical mumbo jumbo, but I needed some sexy action.
Okay, so and it's definitely worth the watch for the whole thing. And maybe some of you could tell if you have a very keen eye that there definitely was real Keanu Reeves, although I don't think there was real Carrie-Anne Moss at all. And including all this stuff is digitally generated, and that would be impressive. And there's still, I would say, a little bit of uncanny valley. Like they still don't look quite 100% true to life, I think, but it's getting close. But not only that, but this is all in a game, basically a video game engine called Unreal Engine 5, which is just in the like testing stages. But the level of visual fidelity that Unreal Engine 5 is achieving, the lighting, the amount of detail that they can have a current computer or even like the Xbox Series X current game console can generate almost true to life graphics at like a real time speed is like, for me, is like very both innovative and leads to a lot of questions about like what's coming next, what's coming in a few years, what's coming in 5 years and 10 years. Are we going to have real time graphical generation ability that is indistinguishable from reality? And what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for entertainment? What does that mean for immersive scenarios that can be used for training or experiencing things like traveling, feeling like you're traveling somewhere, but not having to actually go there, lots of things. So that's what I wanted to share. I'll provide this link because this whole thing is worth a watch. It gets into more action gameplay, but this is actually a demo that you can play, not like not the story part in the beginning, but the demo and the graphical fidelity of it is incredible, I think. So yeah, I'll open it up to any thoughts.
So before I go on with my comment, I'm gonna formally apologize to all of you because I am a humongous Star Wars nerd. And the first place where I saw this kind of technology where I was actually taken aback was watching Star Wars Rogue One, where Peter Cushing is a digital version of Peter Cushing, who's been long gone, was in that movie, and he looked so real where I for a split second, I'm like, I thought he was dead. And I had to really like look at the screen and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I see the differences now. That's a digital person. But when you first see it, it does take you like, oh wow, it almost looks real. It's not real, but it almost looks real. And that technology is becoming more and more prevalent. I see it on my job too. It's not as great as they do it with Disney and the Star Wars movies, but a lot of the training montages are digital versions of actual people.
Yeah.
Right. So that I see your point where that's becoming more and more prevalent in our work environments.
Yeah, and that Carrie Fisher at the end too, young Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia was also digital, and that was a very short clip, and also it was like so close. I feel like it's like 98% there, but like that 2%, if you like look at it long enough, or if you look at it enough times, you're like, okay, it still kind of has a little bit of an unnaturalness to it, but yeah, some of the Unreal Engine stuff, and they also have a part of the engine for characters called I think it's called MetaHuman, but it's basically like very realistic like speech, mouth movements, like expressions. I'll find a link to that as well, but I want to let other people speak as well, what you think of that, what this means for our future.
So yeah, I was listening to Lex Friedman podcast the other day with I guess the new meta stuff that they were talking. I guess Facebook and Zuckerberg were kind of going to where essentially these kind of the same things that they're doing to Unreal Engine is what that'll be what your online profile will be, and then they kind of started going into even deeper into, you know, what will you be able to do as far as like changing profiles, buying the same wardrobe like you regularly would. So like the Zoom call we're on now, you would have just a full different profile. That'll basically be a life outside of what your regular life is now.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, I also saw that Meta, which is like Facebook, and Oculus, which is the VR. It's not going to show up very well, but I did the live learning last week was on. This background is really. But yeah, I think the combination of graphical fidelity and virtual reality and that sort of thing is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in the future.
Yeah,
so
I think it'll move technology along that much faster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personally speaking, I have, I've noticed that the evolution of even video games, it's incredible. Because I mean, before, I'm back from the 80s, I remember 8-bit and, old Atari and old and NES and everything. And now I play everything and everything's so just detailed. I got Elden Ring the other day and it was just, it's a whole nother world. Like I've never seen anything like it. Just the level of detail and even the AI, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's important to, obviously, video games. Video games are entertainment, but they're actually a growing segment of the entertainment industry. They're rapidly, I think they're projected to overtake, or maybe they've already overtaken cinema, basically. But they're like video games are definitely going to, if they haven't, and they're going to be a much bigger part of our entertainment sector. But it's important to realize too that the technologies that are developed for gaming then have other applications, including graphical processing units, GPUs, graphics cards that primarily were originally developed to push games to look better and better. Those are what are used now for artificial intelligence. They're being used in the digital blockchain space, cryptocurrencies, that sort of thing, for processing information and data through graphical processing techniques. Tesla is using, I think they just recently developed this like super GPU stack that's like their own proprietary AI training software for their visual based self-driving for their Tesla vehicles. So their goal is to entirely use the cameras on the vehicle and have the AI program interpret the vision, the images that the car is receiving, and map all of that, and then make driving decisions based on that. And that's all driven by graphical processing, which originally came about and became popular, and the technology in that sector was pushed because of the video gaming industry. So I find it very fascinating. Hi, Chris. You joining us from a library?
I am. Yeah, and speaking of technology, I was having a hard time getting the audio from Zoom to stop coming out of the computer, because I'm like, I brought these headphones. Why is it not obeying me that it's coming? I just thought all computer sound should go to the headphones. But apparently Zoom has an exception, so I finally figured it out, where you hit the up arrow by the mute button and select a speaker. But I tried the system and all kinds of other preferences first. But yeah, I probably shouldn't speak too loud. I'm in the children's area because my kids are on a play date with some neighbor kids.
Wonderful. But, thanks for joining us.
Really
Chris.
Cool presentation. Thank you so far.
Yeah, Chris is one of our faculty who teaches honors courses and is in the academic engagement center with which is where I'm also based out of, and has a philosophy background, right, Chris? So a lot of these things have philosophical implications as well.
They do. I mean, the Matrix itself has, of course, generated a lot of philosophical questions about how do we know what reality is, what constitutes reality, and so I love it that this is actually coming true. The Matrix is real almost. I do not have any technical wizardry to share with you all. I came here to learn from Mark and everybody else, as you can tell by my failure with the headphones.
Don't feel bad. I'm in the same position. My colleagues call me analog.
I better get this. Sorry.
Go ahead, Hector.
No, I am blessed to be married to a woman who is technologically savvy, because I am not. And my colleagues at the job also call me analog, because I'm stuck in the 80s and the 90s. But the Matrix movies actually kind of skewed me towards technology when it comes to entertainment, because now I watch things like Inception, and I watch TV shows like Altered Carbon, where there's a computer chip in the back of your neck, and that contains your consciousness, and you could swap out bodies, like stuff. The Matrix brought me so much deeper into science fiction than I ever thought really could be possible. And it opened my mind in certain areas on what could actually be. And little by little, as I get older, I'm starting to see certain things come to fruition. And it's both exciting and frightening at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I haven't seen the second season of Altered Carbon, which I need to do, but I thought the first season was really interesting. And actually, speaking of all these like digital existence and VR and stuff, if nobody's seen it, if you're into sci-fi, the Ready Player One is a really interesting pseudo. I mean, it's a pretty dystopian world where like the haves and have-nots are definitely much more separated, but it's this idea of what happens if like virtual, very high fidelity virtual gaming entertainment becomes like the dominant thing, so much so that that's pretty much everybody's primary concern, other than providing for their basic needs. That's like what everybody does. It's very interesting, and I guess that there's a second book out. I haven't read the books because it is based on a novel. I think I did hear that the second book was maybe a little disappointing compared to the story and world that was created in the first book. But yeah, I find that very fascinating as well. And it is interesting how a lot of times art and fiction kind of lead to technological, science fiction has a way of becoming like science and technology. Like even things like in Star Trek, I don't know if anybody, and this is just a total tangent that I just thought of because I saw the meme or the like story that like now in one of the original Star Trek movies, the one where like they have to save the whales, but Scotty says something about like, oh, you haven't invented transparent aluminum yet. So like aluminum metal that's like hard and presumably lightweight, that you can see through. Well, now like scientists have figured out how to create transparent metals that it's like something to do with the crystalline structure of the metal is aligned in such a way that you can see through it. And it's probably very, incredibly expensive and hard to make right now, but the fact that we've figured that out and maybe we'll, and like I feel like there's like lots of other things from especially Star Trek that, or I mean, even just the idea of that, like they had the little, their little information, tricorders or whatever they were called. And now, I mean, our smartphones are basically that. Like they can't scan the radiation in our environment, but I'm sure there's like an app and an attachment that would do that, maybe for your phone. But it is interesting that interplay of fiction and science fiction and how sometimes it leads to actual science reality.
It's interesting how entertainment almost like breeds creativity and innovation. Like even stuff that's in the military that's only supposed to be used for the military then becomes part of the public forum. Like the internet, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the internet was a military application. Only the military used something like that, and then it became public. It's funny how things move from one arena to another, and how fast our technology, like we went from like in the game, to go back to gaming, we went from Atari to virtual, like humongous, like I think they're called mega multi RPGs. We went from, you know, Atari to living an entire life in a video game. Like it's so crazy how in 40 years we went from one extreme to that.
Right. And then it begs the question of, yeah, like what is it going to be in 5 years, in 10 years, or in 40 more years? Because that's the other thing to it. And there's a lot of really great presentations. There's this guy named Tim Ferriss, and he has a really great presentation. I think its main focus is artificial intelligence, but he talks about how the rate at which technology is improving is so unnatural to what humans are used to in terms of things growing and progressing, because humans, like our brains, and it's kind of why humans we're not generally very good at high speeds. Like we had to learn how to like drive and maneuver at high speeds, because humans for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, like since we existed, like we could only move as fast as we could run, you know? So like that. And then, so you look at like all of humanity, and then like how quickly technology has progressed in the last, you know, decades, maybe like really like 50 years, like since, you know, basically like when the first computer, like very like mechanical computer, like in, you know, World War II, like the Turing machine, and then you know, punch card computers like in the 50s. And then so that's like 70 years, like how far did our digital technology has come, and what all the other things all the other innovations and advancements that has led to. And it's like, and in a lot of ways, the rate of change is accelerating, because it's like things build on each other, and like the better we get at some things, then like it accelerates how much we get better at other things. So it's hard for us to imagine really what is possible, or what will be, you know, 10 years out, because the rate of acceleration in some things is just beyond our human ability to grasp, you know? So, yeah. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or things that they've thought of that they want to share? Nate, I saw you unmute.
Yeah. So I've worked in the healthcare industry for the last 20 years, and technology that I've heard about recently, excuse me, sorry. The technology that I heard about recently that I thought was pretty interesting, and the implications of it are kind of pretty far-reaching. But there's a company out there called CRISPR,
Yep.
spelled CRISPR. And what this company does, or what the technology that they possess, is they've learned how to edit genomes. And so, to put it in a little easier terms, it's kind of like altering DNA, altering DNA sequences that modifies function, and then some of the uses for it can be. I did read an article probably within the last year that they could potentially use it to treat or prevent COVID by editing out a section of the DNA that could potentially make an individual immune, or even treat diseases that have been proven to be potentially in somebody's genes. Alzheimer's is one. Somebody in my family actually had that years ago, and so it's been something, as I've grown up, worrying, like, will I ever get to a point where I don't know my family? And so if they could identify that genome, or identify that sequence of DNA, they could potentially edit that out, essentially curing that potential condition for an individual before it even becomes a problem.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing, Nate. Yeah, I would say I don't follow it as closely, but definitely the genetic technology and the genetic engineering that comes with CRISPR, and I think some other different types of technologies or approaches that people are working on. It is one of those things that it could very much revolutionize healthcare and disease management or prevention. And I think it also has, it has some scary implications too. But it's just gonna. I'm hopeful with a lot of these technologies that the positives will outweigh the negatives if we, as a society, and we properly manage and get into these technologies and arenas in a way that's based on wisdom and research and the best information that we have available. But yeah, I think there's a lot of really promising potential with that. So thank you for sharing. I don't know if anybody here has seen the movie Gattaca, but that is one of the somewhat basically in the movie Gattaca, and it's really interesting because I don't know what year it's supposed to be set in, but it's supposed to be set in like the near future. Like I would imagine from our current year, maybe like 20, 30, 40 years in the future, because like space travel is a lot more common. Like we're exploring like further out in the solar system, and I think that we're probably at least like 10 to 30 years of like getting further than Mars probably. But in the future though, we figured out the genetic basically modification, and almost all people, especially if you're like middle and upper class, you don't just have children like naturally anymore. I mean, they'll basically take like eggs and sperm from the parents, and they will like fertilize a ton of them, and then they will test and maybe even like modify using genetic technology to basically make like a perfect human that has perfect or better than perfect vision, no propensity to any sort of disease, like just like all the ideal like optimized human. I mean, and it's kind of like eugenics in a way, which is the scary part. But then there's like some people, including the main character, who are a natural born, so they have all the normal flaws that a normal human would have, and so they are considered to be like a lower class of person because they and the main character wants to be an astronaut in this space program, and they basically have to like do all these tricks and like deceive and take on the personality of somebody or take on the persona and the identity of somebody who is genetically kind of perfected individual. It's a really interesting movie, and that's kind of maybe one of the the negative things that we could see if that becomes very commonplace. Anyway. Does anybody else have any thoughts on any of that? There's a lot of ethical, philosophical questions probably affiliated with genetic manipulation, especially of humans, huh, Chris?
Yeah, not my area of specialty, but I definitely know that there are ethical questions.
Where's the line? Where do we stop?
Right.
What, who gets the treatment, who
I have
doesn't?
to sign off for.
Yeah, definitely, Hector. And that's why I think in the movie Gattaca, it does kind of like in Ready Player One, that these like, it's this idea of in the future, these technologies or things that are amazing, like create a further kind of division between the haves and the have-nots. Like it's a new thing that if you have it, you're at privilege and advantage, and if you don't, you're like even more left behind, which is definitely something that we need to think about and figure out how to minimize with a lot of these technologies.
Well, in the West, I think we've cared very much about those ethical and philosophical questions. Certain areas in the East, it doesn't seem like so much, especially when we've only seen it with the idea of cloning. That's the only thing that we've seen from the East. But if they can find loopholes or excuses or whatever you want to call it to to break those kind of ethical boundaries and, perform something like, possibly clone a human, or I know that they're cloning animals, but if they get to that point where they want to clone a human, if, they can make the decision to break that kind of ethical line,
Right.
how far or how long will the rest of the world not also begin to push those boundaries?
Right.
Like, again, where is the line? Where do we
Right.
stop?
Yeah, those are good questions. Yeah, I know there's probably been lots of science fiction where cloning, well, there was not total, it's one of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, but like where he has the clone, and like it's, the clone's like trying to kill him and replace him.
Terminator.
It's not Terminator. It's the one where he goes to Mars, I think.
That is Total Recall. That's Total
That
Recall.
is Total Recall?
Total Recall, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a clone that like tries to replace him, and then like every time, like some of the bad people, like when they die, they have like a clone that then like comes back, things like that. But yeah, that is an interesting question too, and I think they actually touched on it in Altered Carbon. I think it was like illegal to have a clone, but the one criminal element who was after the main character, basically there were like two of them, and they were like, and then they like worked together, I guess, but because it was kind of that idea of like if you have a clone, that like which one is like, it creates a lot of lot of problems.
Virtually immortal.
Yeah.
You create your own immortality.
Right. And that's another one with like, and we didn't even really get into it, but there's that whole idea of singularity. I guess that mainly refers to AI, but also the idea of, are we ever going to get to a point where a computer is advanced enough that you could basically like download a human's not only their knowledge, but somehow like their consciousness into a computer, and then like, is that a person now? Like if it is conscious and has thoughts and feelings of some sort, and yeah, so yeah, it's interesting questions.
If that last statement you made, if that interests anybody else, Lex Friedman usually has some people on that kind of do the same thing, where they talk kind of back and forth and discuss, I guess once you open up Pandora's box, you can't put things back in, but some really interesting conversations that he has on that podcast for sure.
Yeah, I love the Lex Friedman podcast. I think he does have a lot of really interesting guests and topics. So yeah, that's a good recommendation, James. Thank you. We have somebody showing up now, which makes me think that they maybe got the time zone a little bit confused, but we are at time. Does anybody have any closing thoughts? Yep. Thank you, Hector, for sharing Lex Friedman. Sorry if my dogs were a little loud. I think my spouse just got home and dogs were excited about that.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Hi, Derek.
Long time no see. Sorry, I just, work's been, it's work, man. Everyone's going back to real life.
Yeah. So yeah, well, you just caught the tail end. It was this past hour. I'm obviously, if you had work stuff going on, but it's maybe might have been a time zone confusion as well. But yeah, we hope you can make it to the next one. So I'm going to wrap it up, but thank you everybody for attending and for some great questions, sharing some great innovative and creative things that you've been reading about, interested in, and some great discussions. I think it went all around here and there, but a lot of common threads throughout. So I might do something similar to this, and we certainly will be doing another roundtable focusing on one of the other honors pillars in the coming months. So keep an eye out for that. And other than that, we have Clifford and I are doing monthly. We're doing a basically TED Talks club, which is where we have a general topic, and then we're going to watch 2 separate TED Talk videos and then discuss each one in between. And you can keep an eye out on the learning community, the honors learning community page for that. And we'll also send out invites and reminders. And then we also have the honors live learning, which is also once a month. So there should be at least two events a month. And then the honors roundtable, I think, will be every other month, or in some cases every maybe third month. So keep an eye out for all of that. And thank you for coming. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks for this. Have a good one. Be safe, everybody.